Bad boys, bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when the insurance agents come for you? By the Lucas and Zack podcast.
That was Zach's plan for this. I was gonna sing "You Make Me Feel So Young" from Frank Sinatra, but
But what does
just
that have to
because
do with the movie?
it just feels classy and old. This movie's like classy and old. It's kind of an era.
You can do that next week
Do
for
that next week.
whatever the Stanwyck movie we have next. Yeah.
Oh, just to be clear, next week when we talk Christmas movies, I will be singing Christmas songs in the vein of the Rat Pack, and you'll just have to deal with it. I may do a whole like 20-minute set before the podcast ever gets started.
People are gonna hear you sing and like actually put effort into the songs, and they're gonna never ask for me to do it again.
You make me feel so young.
Not even showing up. Do re mi fa sol la ti do.
And welcome to the Lucas and Zack Sing Scales podcast, where the two of us compete to see which one of our voices is more destroyed by the time the recording starts. Welcome into another week. I believe this is week 4 of the lovely Barbara Stanwyck, who is just, it's weird to say underrated, I feel like, in the history of Hollywood. Zach's just fucking starting noises over there. Thanks a lot, Zach. Yeah, Barbara Stanwyck is very talented. And I'm going to share an anecdote that I'm not going to dig into this film in any detail, but I wanted to share this anecdote, which is that I was watching the 2005 remake of King Kong the other day, the Peter Jackson version, and there's a moment where he loses his leading lady for his film, and they run through a bunch of actresses of the era, you know, Myrna Loy, Scarlett O'Hara, there's a couple other people, I don't remember their names, and they never brought up Barbara Stanwyck, and I think that was a shame because Barbara Stanwyck should clearly be on screen with a giant ape. But that is for another time. Before we dig into the film, Zach, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm paying my cat right now, and so it's making me feel a lot better than I was 10 seconds ago.
I'm not gonna lie. I could not tell if you're saying petting or paying. Does the cat make a sound?
I'm paying my cat. My cat has brought to my attention some photographs I didn't know existed, and now I'm having to pay him off.
The cat wants labor laws. As a union man, you should want cat unions to flourish. Let's dig into our favorite opening segment, which is, of course, Last Letterboxd Movie. Zach Ford, I hear you have a big one you would like to talk about today. Let's hit it.
I'm gonna talk about Professor Octopus : evading sharks 101 : my octopus teacher.
If this movie was about an octopus teaching people how to dodge shark attacks, I would watch it like 3 months ago.
That is kind of what it is. That's at least what I took from it. Like, I know that I can hide myself in corals and go into a ball and jump on a shark's back. This is the one good 5 minutes of this movie. My octopus teacher is the film version of going to a classy dinner party. You're all in the middle of a meal, and a guy starts talking about his like cool scuba diving trips, and then 20 minutes later you realize the guy's still talking, even though you've tuned out for the last 10 minutes, and no one has gotten a word in, and he just dominates the conversation for the whole night because he just thinks that his life is real cool. And it's just not. There's a lot of the person is about a guy who may have been having like a midlife crisis, but they never fully explain what he's dealing with, but they act like you could just feel that he's like struggling with her yet. But he just starts diving and following an octopus around, or I like to call it octopus peeping. So he took up octopus peeping every day. He could think about nothing but her. He's really in love with this octopus. It's a great story. And he like assumes these like life lessons on life and death and survival from this octopus, but none of them are very tangible or very fleshed out ideas. He just kind of says they are there, but really you just watch, like, he's just talking about this cool shit that he watches octopus do, and it's really all the substance it really has. If they embrace the like, let's watch this octopus do cool shit, I would be in for it. But the movie thinks it is so much more revelatory, even with like these very thoughtful shots of him just like staring off into the water or like staring off into nowhere. I think a wall. I think there's nothing but a wall in front of him. Why the music plays and he talks about what he learned from this octopus, and it's all just very pretentious in the way it's filmed and the way he talks. It really just ends with him talking about how his son dies with him now, but they never really like flesh out that relationship. It just kind of comes from nowhere. So there's really no lesson to learn. I don't know what this octopus taught. That's my main issue. What was the octopus's class? What was he a professor in? What was his specialty? I don't know. So I don't think this guy earned his degree in octopusology because he didn't seem like thorough enough of what he learned. Here's the two best things that happened other than my previous shark dodging story is you see a crab swim, which like I've never seen before, and they just like go sideways and like flap their claws. And even if you asked me if they swam, I would have said no, and they just go on the floor. And then later you see a lobster swim, and they just like flip out their tail to like squirt like jet power off, and that was really exciting. I could have watched that for hours. And I think just some anthropomorphization through a lot of this. That like I love Disney nature movies because they're dumb and they know what they're doing and they're for kids. It's all anthropomorphization, but this like thinks the anthropomorphizing is like meaningful and actually relevant to the animal's experience rather than you're just mirroring your own emotions. It's not self-aware enough of what he's doing. I think it's a horrible and kind of problematic movie and actually connecting to the environment. It's fake empathy and not real like empathy of the natural experience. It's like we can only care about nature if we can like see ourselves in it, which is like bullshit.
I have a couple questions. The first question I wanted to start with, which is the most recent thing you said, is that is this just like a really like pretentious version of like a standard nature documentary that just observes nature in action?
No, because he puts himself into it way too much. You just see him a lot doing nothing. It's him swimming, but then you see him like standing in the house and thinking about it. He's too much of a character in a way to make it seem like just watching nature things. And it's all like his own hand like done photography. So like there's cool stuff, but the photography can be so much better if it was professionally done.
Right. If this was the Blue Planet, this would look better.
Yeah. This is just like a person showing you their scuba diving pictures and making a movie and narrate over it.
Is this like, so is this more similar to something like Grizzly Man, where it's like a really kind of weird portrait of a person as much as it is something about the wild?
If what was named Doug Trudell or something like that. Why am I blanking on his name? The Grizzly Man.
I don't think
if he made a movie about him talking to bears, that's what this would be. Now, not Werner Herzog making a movie about the guy and having a lot more complex ideas of humans' interactions with nature. But if this guy who just like thought he was doing this like soulful connection with these bears that was kind of made up in his own head, if he made a movie, that's what this was.
Fair. Do you think the octopus passed the praxis exam, or how many praxis exams do you think they succeeded? No.
I'm not convinced this all was just a scam. This is like a Donald Trump University scam.
Octopus University.
Octopus just like got him, lured him in, and then like just was all hoax. Didn't really have anything to teach. There's no certificate or license even hanging on the wall. I'm pretty sure he was an amateur hoax con artist.
And then the most important question, Timothy Treadwell. Yes, I looked it up as well. The most important question of this is, how horny is the guy for the octopus? Is the real question that we all really care about.
I don't think they make it out too much, but I am not convinced he didn't at least jerk off in the ocean once. Maybe not the octopus, but I think he was just having a real experience of being in the water.
A little bit weird. Yeah, it's sort of like how like when you watch the Grizzly Man, you're like, this is a little bit you're the way you think about these things in relation to you is a little weird. This is not how normal people think of animals. Like if we talk to Jane Goodall or David Attenborough, they would not speak of them like this. This is a weird thing though, where like you have these people make these documentaries, and like half the people who make documentaries of animals are like, famous naturalists who have like a clear understanding between what the animal is doing and what their interaction is, and like, the animal might come up to me and like look at me, but I'm not like its friend, and we're not like we're not like mind melding or something weird. And then there's like these people who come and make these documentaries, and you're like, you maybe have some mental health issues that you're relating so heavily to an animal that does not have the ability to relate to you.
I think what feeds into that too is I feel like he's pretty open to him being like an amateur animal appreciator. Like he never gave animals a second thought before this, and because he's makes such a big deal of how he learned to appreciate the natural life. Like he like never grew up with a dog or something. Like this is his like first experience with seeing an animal in the wild, which is, I mean, where were you? I guess are you a city boy? But I don't need you who've never like thought about animals and what it means for them to exist. I don't need you making a nature documentary for me because you have no real perspective.
Yeah.
You should watch a bunch of nature documentaries and connect.
It is fascinating to see what nature documentaries like blow up and become this big thing. Because like my activist teacher, which I think in some ways the hook of my activist teacher was just like, it sounds more interesting than a standard documentary because it sounds weirder. And I think that's honestly part of the reason why he said like this sometimes succeeds.
Because the title is the best movie-based meme in the past 5 years. It's just make activist teacher jokes.
There's probably a reason that my activist teacher gets a bunch of recognition and a bunch of people watch it. And, David Attenborough, Life on Our Planet, which sounds significantly less interesting, and you know exactly what it is just by listening to the title, probably gets less views because it's not as weird. Sometimes the documentaries that get the biggest are just the weirdest stuff. Yeah. Let's talk about my last Letterboxd movie, which is a very different vein. In the midst of watching, Barbara Stanwyck fun stuff, I finally caught up with Christopher Langan's Happy Death Day to You, 2017, and 2019's Happy Death Day to You, the sequel, which is interesting that I never watched these in the moment. I really like them both. The first one better than the second one. The basic premise is a girl wakes up in a dorm room and lives out through a day and then is murdered and then awakens in exactly the same moment and has to like figure out why they're stuck in a time loop. And so that's the first movie. And the second movie explores sort of the similar ideas, but with the idea of multiverses rather than being stuck in a time loop. They're actually quite inventive. They're very fun. It's like very well cast, very fun like group of actors. It's interesting, it's dynamic. It's kind of like the new age of horror film. I believe these are Blumhouse. And then most importantly, like Jessica Roth is fantastic in these two films. She's just absolutely magnetic. She just gets she gets like a really cool role where she gets to simultaneously play kind of like self-obsessed, annoying frat girl, but then also like vulnerable college student, but also badass, and like she gets to play to so many nuanced different perspectives, and I think she's kind of amazing in both of them, like legitimately like top 10 performance of those years. It's just a lot of fun, and while we're talking about them, I know that you do not like the first one and did not see the second one, and I was wondering if we could dig into that. And maybe you don't, maybe it's been too long though.
Yeah, it's been really long, and I also watched it on an Amtrak train. But I think horror movies are a hard sell for me. Sometimes horror comedies maybe I can get a little more into, but it's hard for me to get past the tropes and find something original. And when you're taking, a tropey genre of horror and making it with the tropiest of subgenres of time loop movies, to where everyone I think gives time loop movies, which I love Groundhog Day so much, but they give time loop movies such the benefit of the doubt. They do like one thing new and they ask like it's so witty and so ingenious and what it's able to do with this time loop. It's every time they use the format when it's just not. They just put into another genre, but it's kind of still obvious, and a lot of its takes. This is so partially why I wasn't but it was not as hot on Palm Springs as everybody else, because they still just find a lot of the takes expected. Like you've seen this, like Groundhog Day did it perfectly in a lot of the same jokes, a lot of the same, philosophical components are still there. They just switch up like a couple of things I would expect. It doesn't make it super ready. I also feel this is like the dumbest thing to complain about, but it did bother me when watching it. Because all horror movies do, but the villain to me is just it just kind of makes no sense. To say something makes no sense realistically in a movie that's about a time loop is preposterous. But without spoiling, they make it a real person. It becomes the murderer, but there's like no way they're always at the right place at the right time. And it's just like this scenario cannot repeat itself 30 times, and there's like definitely supernatural components that would need to be had for this murder, which like you say the same thing for like Halloween and other stuff. But I just think that because they pick such a normal person to be the villain, it sticks out more to me. It just seems
I love that choice personally. I just think that I love the fact that they, because of the multiple times going through it, you as an audience member spent so much time checking off different people as they couldn't be it because they're alive or in that moment. And I think the fact that they almost have you check off a character as too normal to be involved or like too friendly to be involved, and then turn at the end, I think is actually quite smart. And I think it's a really interesting, and I like how,
I don't think it's an issue that's a normal person. I think it's an issue that there's no way this person can commit all these murders because they're in 5,000 places at once and always at the right place.
But it's not 5,000 places. It's one place.
Sense. But somehow they always are where they need to be to do this, and it just would not function that way. It's like completely improbable just because the movie wants its bits and wants its things.
I don't know if that's true, to be honest. I think we can argue about this more. I actually don't think it's that improbable that person being in the places, because I think that it would make sense that they would have an idea of where who the main character is, just because of the relationship they have. It is interesting though, like you watch it on a train, because it does feel like something that you should be able to invest in, even on like a situation that's not necessarily prime movie watching.
I remember what I was doing. I had like a movie night. Sarah we were on the Amtrak train from Glacier National Park in Montana for our honeymoon trip. Not honeymoon, but anniversary trip. And she was going to bed early, and I like stuck a bunch of wine onto this train. I was like, I'm gonna like drink all these wine bottles and like double head Happy Death Day and the original Mission Impossible, and that's how I spent my night. That was my double header. It was a delightful experience, but I think I did watch this first. I wasn't that heavy into the wine, but
interesting.
It was. I just wanted to stay up late and have a late night train movie watching experience.
I will say two things. One, you were going to Montana for your anniversary, which is an interesting choice.
For the 1 year, it's a national park.
Yeah, but it's still Montana. Like Montana, pretty low in like states I have interest in being in.
Glacier National Park is one of like the biggest national parks.
I know, but you're finding me. I just want to shit on Montana for a second. I'm just trying to take the opportunity.
The Amtrak trip together was part of the purpose too.
I understand.
So we could try to look outside, hand in hand.
I also will say, from a perspective of our own personal taste, I like slashers a lot more than you do. I think that's a fair statement to make. So I think that a movie that plays with the genre and does stuff with it is just on surface level more down my alley than yours, which is funny that you watched it before I did. And that's very weird. And I think I just kind of was like, I'm going to watch all three of Christopher Langdon's films because I wanted to catch up on them.
It's also a brand of humor. I think you're just more forgiving. It's this very kind of college-y, mainstream humor.
Wow, it's just like that's not at all. That's not at all insulting to me as a human being.
I didn't say you're more. I didn't say you like it. I said you're more tolerant. To me, it annoys me, and I find your jokes dumb, and I don't need lazy like teen sex jokes.
Because Zach Ford is a man, and he does not need teen jokes. Teens should shut up and leave him alone.
Oh God, I wish. I really wish.
Let's go to a movie where there are no teenagers in it, or I guess maybe we can discuss how old the character is, because I think it is somewhat unclear.
19.
Okay, so that doesn't count anymore.
I made that up, but that's what I'm going with.
I would argue I don't think she is 15 or 16.
Let's not talk about who we are talking about ever. We're talking about Barbara Stanwyck. She's 19 in this movie.
Edward G. Robinson is actually 19. That's the real
No,
joke.
I think he's still in high school. I think
My apologies.
I think he's preparing for prom.
He clearly has his pick of dates.
Edward G. Robinson definitely never went to prom, right? Like, I'm not convinced he's ever been on the date.
I'm pretty sure Edward G.
so into his insurance business, he doesn't have time for dates. He's just out there solving crimes, making sure the insurance company doesn't get patient out.
I think Barton Keyes definitely like skipped high school and just went straight to college.
Do you think Edward G. Robinson was a kid detective? Like he was like a Nancy Drew type?
I think this character of Barton Keyes is definitely a kid detective, or like potentially like a
and
pre
never got to be. And he got kicked out to detective school, so he just had to make an insurance agency the most like he could.
Yeah. Let's before we get too deep into these PowerPoints, let's have Zack Ford give us the Double Indemnity plot summary. Straight from his iron trap of a brain where all things are remembered.
Okay, it starts at the backbone of America, an insurance company, and Fred McMurray is talking on the phone, confessing to her crime right at the start, saying, this is what happened to you. Never would have guessed Keyes to. So it all goes back to where he, as a insurance salesman, trying to sells life insurance to this random man, but instead he only ever keeps speaking to his wife, played by Barbara Stanwyck, who hatches a plan with Fred McMurray to murder the husband and get away with it, and through a double indemnity clause get like double the amount of money. So they tried to murder him in a car and then act like he fell off a train because of an injury, because he definitely died from this like slow moving train injury. But what they didn't expect is Keyes is out there, man, and nothing gets past him. But Murray thought that as an insurance agent, he knew all the ways to get around it and never get caught. And the cops don't care, but Keyes insurance company will not have them pay for the coverage. So eventually there's some double crossing. Barbara Stanwyck was never really in it for the love. There's another guy involved, and she was just kind of in it for herself. Shit happens. People get shot. People get thrown off trains. The end. I don't know. Edward G. Robinson runs like he always does. Nothing gets past him. How is this not a series of movies about Keyes?
That's a good point.
He could have been like a Pen Dan-esque series.
This is such a weird. The double indemnity clause is just bizarre. It's a bizarre.
Are you looking it up? Are you going to give us legal corner?
I'm going to give you a quick
legal corner. We got to bring Scott Harvey for this every week now.
I'm reading directly from Wikipedia here. Double indemnity is a clause or provision in life insurance or accident policy whereby the company agrees to pay the stated multiple, potentially double or triple, of the face amount of the contract in cases of death caused by accidental means. This includes murder by a person other than and not inclusion with the beneficiary of the insurance policy, and most accidental death. It excludes suicides and deaths caused by the insured person's own gross negligence as well as natural causes. I guess according to 2006, it covers like 5% of cases. This is, and then like people with dangerous jobs as well as children, like such like heavy construction, or if you're a kid, they're not eligible for multiple indemnity. This is, I'm gonna be honest, it's a very weird clause. I don't know why you would put this clause in insurance. I don't know what I guess the only point of putting this clause in insurance inside an insurance policy you're giving out is that you're like, I will put this clause in there so you sign into this thinking that this exists. At the same time, 5% of people are ever going to get paid out on that. Most people will never get paid out on that, and it's just a way of hooking people into signing a policy.
Yeah,
it's a very weird
scam. I have lots of thoughts about it. How do we let insurance happen? How is this a thing? This is just like a full-on scam. It's just you're betting on your life. This is legalized gambling. That's all insurance is. They are bookies that take your bets on your life. And you befall in tragedy. It's a capitalist society. has given too much power to the insurance man, and now they're out here solving our crimes. That's too much power.
It is. It is very weird. I mean, I think that there is in value in insurance. In a lot of types of insurance, like car insurance or house, or like there are certain insurances where it makes sense because it's harder for them to block your claims. But stuff like this insurance company literally exists and functions and succeeds by selling people policies, having them pay for them, and then the minute that they actually have something happen, figuring out a way to prove, or basically, let's be real, a lot of it is just bullying and being like, if you try, basically, this is like very like big business, like shitty big business politics of being like, we have a bunch of lawyers and money. We're going to block your claim. You can sue us, but you don't have the resources to succeed in suing us because you drive a milk truck and you're going to run out of the ability to fight us super, super fast.
Yeah. I'm in the process of buying a house, and so we're thinking house insurance. So this is all just making my blood boil because we're not even going to get like qualified for our mortgage if we don't have house insurance. And I just know we're just spending money so we can just get our mortgage.
I mean, the good news with house insurance is if like a lightning storm hits a tree and the tree smashes on your house, the house insurance actually has value.
Yeah.
Less value if
you're try to cut on the hope that this happens.
I think
or not hope, but the possibility.
So I think one thing is where your bet analogy falls apart is this is not a bet on something. This is a hedge against something. So this is the equivalent of where if you at the beginning of the season go, I'm going to bet on the Patriots at 3,000 to 1 to win the Super Bowl, and then you get to the semifinals of the conference finals of the playoffs, and then you make a hedge bet on whoever the Patriots are playing to win the Super Bowl. That's more what insurance is. It's a hedge against something.
Insurance is betting against me. Insurance is betting that something will not happen.
But it's a hedge against something happening. So like you're betting on not having to use the policy, but the policy is a hedge if something bad happens. So you don't get left hanging. Let's talk about, so obviously this is interesting from the insurance perspective, and we'll come back to this. But another area where this is really interesting is Barbara Stanwyck is unique in stars of her era in that she almost consistently plays people who are lying, involved in some kind of fraud, some kind of scheme. And this is the most extreme version where Barbara Stanwyck is genuinely a bad person. Like she is
it's a real villain.
She's probably a double murderer, if we're being honest.
Yeah, double murderer and typical con artist and seductress, and I don't know. I'm sure she extorted money somewhere along the line.
It's just interesting because as a star, like she didn't have to take these roles. So if you think about it in context, Barbara Stanwyck probably get to pick the roles she was being in. So the fact that she would, different than a lot of the people of her era, choose to play characters who are either morally bad or morally ambivalent it's a choice. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing in terms of what it says about what she's interested in playing as an actress.
Because also a lot of the like notable film fatale movies, at least from what I know, were not like the top leading ladies. They did not take those roles, maybe because of the because of the negative light that they're shown. But I think maybe she was attracted to this because it is using all her strengths. We said there is a lot of similarities to everything she's done in Ballfire and Lady Eve, which is that kind of street smart con artist trickster. But in those movies, it's played for laughs, and there's redemption plays for them. So it takes those skills but gets rid of any redemption arc and turns out what's the meanest version that she can do with this, where she is the smartest person in the room and gets away with murder. She doesn't get away with murder, but for a while, but actually commits crimes.
And this is also the movie where she doesn't feel, in all the other one, she starts off pulling a scheme, either because for her father or some associate or something, and then at some point she gets an emotional connection to the other characters and kind of goes back on the con and starts feeling bad about it. This one, she has a heart of ice. It is ice cold. She does not feel stuff for other people. She is totally manipulative. Every choice she makes in the movie is revealed at the end. She doesn't make any choices. She doesn't actually fall for Fred MacMurray. She just thinks she can use Fred MacMurray. Like all of it is related to just there's a focus to it all.
And he's not even the only piece. They just show how many strings she's pulling, because there's also the stepdaughter's boyfriend that she's also pulling along and kind of manipulating. So as it unveils, the scheme's also just so much larger than any of the other schemes she was able to pull off. But she pulls it off with the same kind of centrality that she has in all the movies. So that's the important part too, because she is a very central performer. I would say more than a lot of the other classic actors. I think a lot more than Katharine Hepburn is the centrality she plays with, but using that in the more sinful way here. It's a little more, where it can lead you down the wrong path if you fall for her apple in a way.
Well, it is interesting because she's playing a sexual being in an era where a lot of the stars were the girl next door, the kind of quirky, kind of cute. I mean, if you think of a lot of the Katharine Hepburn movies of the same era, there are a lot of like cute and funny. She's like the person you want to hang out with. Like she's like the characters are obviously attracted to her, but Hepburn's never trying to make characters attractive. If you think of like Philadelphia Story or Bringing Up Baby, a lot of these movies at the same time period are just like she's just like the person you want to hang out with. Who doesn't love Katharine Hepburn? She's got universal appeal. She's such a great person. And then you come to this movie and like Stanwyck's a bad person. Like you're not supposed to like Stanwyck. Although kind of the brilliance of this film is that Stanwyck is such a powerful personality and such an engaging film presence that you want to watch somebody who is a terrible person.
You're still kind of rooting for them to get away with it in a way.
Oh, yeah.
I think maybe Fred MacMurray is part of that too. Even I think Fred MacMurray to me is more isolating as a figure. I think maybe just in 21st century minds of his kind of, creepy attitude towards trying to pick her up pretty right away, this married woman that she's in. And I think also having a little bit of shield, like he is this moral man that just got tricked when it's like, no, you are responsible for your own actions. To me, he just always seems more villainous in a way, and somehow I'm still like rooting for Barbara Stanwyck to get away with this, even above him. I want her to trick him and get away with all the money. Because her seductiveness is, just as effective on us as it is the characters.
Well, in some ways, the movie plays her as she's definitely evil, but she also is just like seen as a different level of person. Like MacMurray has such base instincts. He's the standard idiot who walks in and sees a nice pair of legs and suddenly is like falling for them. Like there's just like a baseness to his even his plan. He kind of just buys into this dumb plan to kill her husband because he just kind of wants to fuck her. Like that's not really. There's nothing really nuanced about it. Her entire thing is much more complicated. She's like, no, I want to do this policy on him because I think he's not going to give anything in the will. Like there's like extra levels of calculation and nuance to it. And he's just such base instincts male, which is very classic noir. I mean, men often are drawn by like real base instincts in noir films.
I think what the movie does well too, to prevent us from rooting for it too much, because you're still on your side, but it's really around the halfway point where they like say you probably should stop this. When she comes off as the true evil, which is when they, the daughter says how she like saw her at her mom's, bed. I'm kind of letting her die, and that's when like, oh, like this person actually is true evil. I think that's when they, take the sheet off in a way of revealing who she truly is, that she really is this mastermind criminal, and not someone. Because for a while you think that maybe she was treated, horribly by the husband, and she just needs to get out of it. And there's, some, vengeance that she just feels needs to be done towards him, which you can be a little more forgiving about. But when this is a string of murders all in a ploy just to get money somehow, and that was always like a loveless marriage to get money, and then you can understand her true character.
Well, part of it is you present a narrative that she pushes, this narrative of, I don't know, he did this, he never pays attention to me, he slaps me around, he's terrible to me, the daughter doesn't like me. She presents this narrative which is incredibly favorable to her and incredibly unfavorable to other people. And then you as the audience are treated to a different narrative, which is the narrative where you start seeing the other characters. Like the daughter is really influential in this. She obviously busts the whole thing over like, no, I think she killed my mom too. And like, oh, she was the nurse that became my dad's wife. And like this, maybe she just kind of took advantage of him in this moment when he was feeling really sad after his wife passed. And that's where you start really seeing we start seeing Stanwyck in just less favorable light as more information comes out, and it becomes harder and harder to see her as the victim of a situation rather than the mastermind behind the situation. And it's like, oh, you're not justified in trying to get something out of a situation. You're trying to get something out of a situation because the only reason you got in the situation in the first place was because you were trying to take advantage of people.
Yeah, for sure. What do you, just to move it a little bit, what do you think of Fred MacMurray in this movie? I think he's grown on me a lot.
Fred MacMurray is an actor I've always enjoyed. He's not he does not have the charisma heights of some of the people of his era. He's not necessarily the best actor, but he is just a really solid performer. He's really good if you put him in the right stuff. He's a little bit of a dick. He's kind of a dick in everything he's in. He's a little bit arrogant, but you sort of understand why people like him in the first place. There is some it's an interesting mix of he's a bit of a dick, but he's also sort of a noble character. There seems to be a higher sense of morals, even though his genuine personality, at least represented towards other people, is a little bit dickish. I think he's good for this stuff. I think he's definitely not an actor I could see in a lot of movies, but I think when they put him in the right stuff, and he's been in a couple movies with Stanwyck, I think he really works as a good foil offer because, especially in this, because you kind of like the fact that he is a dick and he's a little bit of like a pig. So that it kind of muddies the water when you start thinking, man, Stanwyck is terrible. But then you're like, yeah, but MacMurray's a dick and he's a pig and he was trying to sleep with her from the beginning. So it kind of makes it adds to the moral ambiguity of the entire film, which in some ways is why the film works. If Stanwyck was just the out and out evil, this movie is a lot less interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it helps us from forgiving him too much too, because it'd be easy to he just fell for the the sinful apple from the snake. It's something we all do. It's the parable of how we can go down the wrong track, but deep down we're all noble. But I think you can see that this is a path that he could have taken many times down the road if it wasn't just for her coming at this point. That he probably would have fell for something else, another thing. I do think. Interesting about Fred MacMurray comparing it to the other movies we have watched so far is he's the closest to an equal as far as the street smart, intelligent one that can go line for line, go trick for trick, because he does help foil out this plan too, and he when their banter, he's just as quick as she is. When usually in the other movies we watch, the comedies, it's the contrast of her and kind of a dope, like this innocent dope that is perplexed and just buried under her wit and her street smartness. To this, they seem more on equal levels, which helps make the chemistry of the romance, even though it comes off so quick, it still adds this steaminess because I think their energies were just verging more directly. I think that's why Fred MacMurray is a great companion for her, because he can pull off similar energy to her for them to play off. Rather than Henry Fonda, who does not have any of that energy, whatsoever. So it's more of that kind of fish on the water chemistry rather than these people are meant to be together in the most evil way possible.
Yeah, I mean, he's the first character that it sort of makes sense why in the movie that is the most dark, evil portrayal of Stanwyck. You would also get the male character that is the least goody-goody. If you go and watch the Lady Eve, Henry Fonda is a goody-goody. He's a nice dude. He's a bit of a nerd, and Gary Cooper's a bit of a nerd, and he's a bit of a good guy. Even when he's the dude who's basically homeless, he's still kind of seen as this moral, upright man of character. And this is kind of, in some ways, it feels like MacMurray fits this well because he's allowed to play that. He's not asked to be Gary Cooper, Henry Fonda. In some ways, the leads fit the movies. You couldn't you couldn't switch MacMurray and Fonda. That wouldn't work. Fonda would never be believable as this insurance character. Yeah. There's they very much are leaning into the core traits of the actor. Yeah, I think MacMurray is quite good in this. While we're talking about supporting characters, let's talk about Edward G. Robinson, who plays Barton Keyes. He's the claims adjuster. I think he's the most interesting character in the movie. He's the guy who basically they get claims in, and he goes, "You're full of shit. You actually didn't do this. You didn't have an accident. We don't owe you anything. We're never paying anything out to you," which is interesting. So this is a fascinating a fascinating perspective and the way this movie plays with your own feelings, because on just a baseline level, we should hate the Edward G. Robinson character because he's screwing all these people who had him policies. He's anti the everyman. Like, he's the person who, for the company, helps the company maintain profits by basically fucking over and screwing people out of and bullying people into signing waivers so that they don't get paid. But he's also technically the hero of this story, which is such a weird twist. And kind of what makes it such a good film is that it takes characters that you would typically cheer for and it puts them in a position where you can't cheer for them. And it takes just, you shouldn't cheer for Edward G. Robinson. And you don't necessarily cheer that much for him, but he is also the character who's in the right, the character that solves the murder, the character that prevents the escape from
he's a real noble hero in this twisted Billy Wilder way. I think Billy Wilder does have a lot of this classic, American respect for the, industry that is the insurance, that there is some, nobility in trying to keep authenticity in these deals. I think, in a way, like making sure everything's on the up and up. It's the honorability of what insurance could be is what this is meant to be. And so Edward G. Robinson is trying to keep that pure in a way. Which is, to me, like, I have not hard time getting past it because it doesn't like affect the movie in a negative way for me. But I do just think about this every time I watch the whole movie, on how Edward G. Robinson is like a real superhero in a way. Like, he is like the police detective you would vote for in other police movies, which could also be problematic, but that he is treated as this true detective in a way, someone who can uncover mystery unlike anyone else. He's like a noir or like a comic hero.
It is interesting
because Tracy.
Oftentimes noirs will be detective stories. It's a very common melding of the two, as noir detective stories. And in some ways, he is the Sherlock Holmes. He is the Philip Marlowe of this piece. Like, he is this dude who is a mid-level employee at an insurance company who happens to be sort of a genius. Like, I mean, my name is a joke. I said the G in Edward G. Robinson stands for genius. Like, but this character is like simultaneously sort of brilliant. Like, his deductions are on the Sherlock Holmes level, where he just like everything. Like, Fred McMurray is like smart and knows this business and sets this whole murder up, and he somehow figures it out like relatively quickly.
He's the best of the best, and he tells you no one could do it. No one could get past him. No one can fool Edward G. Robinson. I don't know. Can't remember the character's names. Banksy. What's his name?
Barton Keyes.
Barton Keyes.
Okay. But it is fascinating because you're asked to, like, in theory, this character should not be as sympathetic or as heroic as the character ends up being, but because the movie places so much of the plot around the legitimacy of the claim made in an insurance policy, he ends up coming up as the hero. Which is, again, let's talk about something you've been talking about, and let's
Well, I got a couple of thoughts about Edward G. Robinson.
Oh, go ahead. Then we'll go back to him.
All right. So Edward G. Robinson, also just a switch up for him, because I think largely, he is played gangster roles. He's this kind of, I think, the kind of like overcompensating small person, the kind of a Joe Pesci like character in a way that can be dangerous and unpredictable, and can rule things. So this is, once again, I think, using some of that kind of fireball energy that he has, that like tough wild card energy, and using it in the opposite case, using it as someone that you don't want to mess with, but you don't want to mess with because he's going to like bring you down for the positive light. So it's taking a spin on that persona of him. He also is just like real interesting look. I did double check this because, and I thought I was making this up, because like Edward G. Robinson looks like a real life Looney Tunes character. That is just his appeal, and he sounds like one. They did model the mob boss Rocky after Edward G. Robinson, so he was interpreted into a Looney Tunes character. And so just like, I think that he has a fun energy because he's just like a goofy guy. We talked on one of the episodes, I think, Lady Eve, about how like classic movies just have like such interesting looking performers that we just don't see anymore, and he's just like the epitome of just an interesting 1940s character that I feel like, I mean, I guess Joe Pesci is probably the closest we've had any other generations, but otherwise we don't have people that unique in their presence.
I think we talked about in Ball of Fire with the other professors was
Oh
just
yeah.
like the idea of all these. The character actor is such an important thing for like the 30s, 40s, and
Yeah.
50s, and just like
Yeah, wait till we get
having
to
people
Christmas in Connecticut, which is just like a character actor machine.
get two more big ones in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is interesting, and I think Edward G. Robinson. He's a little bit quieter and then some like he's done other movies where he's been like the hero chasing down, he's in Orson Welles' The Stranger where he's hunting down Orson Welles, but even in that he's a somewhat darker, more brutal character. Like he sort of falls into more like even the good guys go dark when they have to hunt down the bad guys, but like in this one he's sort of just like a nerd who's like, yeah, I'm gonna figure this out, and I'm gonna look at all these features, and I'm gonna come back to you and say, oh, okay, I guess this is how. It's a very interesting. Like, he is a detective, but he's also like a detective who sits in his office and goes, "This doesn't make sense," and then like goes out and finds pieces of information that, in theory, he shouldn't be able to find. But
He's a play detective. He's someone who added a lot more power into his role than was not necessarily there. That was my kid detective comparison. It was like just a normal kid, but they have this, complex of power that they think they deserve this authority, so they play detective and solve mysteries. So he implements this into his what otherwise should just be a boring desk job to make him seem, more powerful than he is. He just like I said in mob movies, he overcompensates in a way for his height. That's his whole character setup. He's doing the same thing here. He's overcompensating for the way he looks, for what could be his place in society as a shorter, odder man, but taking that power back by being this, force him into this authority role that he set up for himself.
he did really. It is. I think you're supposed to believe that he just kind of created this role for himself, because no one really acts in this way. Even just like he has this kind of like
No one takes that
swag.
that seriously. It's like you look at the paperwork and you say, did they get it or not? But it's like, no, I'm going to do the groundwork. I'm going to get DNA tracked and fingerprints.
He even has this swagger to him. Like he doesn't dress like everybody else. He doesn't wear the full suit. He takes it off. He rolls his sleeves up. He's got a little bit of that like rough and griminess, except like he's an insurance guy and he goes into these meetings and he kind of just like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We have whole books on all the different times. It's like he's like a nerd for all like these weird ways people would kill each other. And but he also does have like this real like little bit of he's swinging it around, he's flexing on everybody, and he totally is taking this role more than what it's designed to be. Like the role is clearly designed to be just like, look at the paperwork, does anything look really blatantly not right? If
Yeah.
And that's why he's the best, because he's the dude who digs like 9 layers deeper than he needs to dig.
Yeah, and now to connect to where I think you were going to start, but the I think moral greatness of his character and the resolution of this film, which I actually don't think Billy Wilder thinks as great as it actually comes off. I think Billy Wilder truly believes in the heroicism of Edward G. Robson's doing, but I think the gray area is that like he never really seems like he cares about the murder itself or like the morality of murder. It's all about the con against the insurance company. It's his business. It's not about someone committing murder, but someone's trying to fraud the company. It's all from a business state of mind to solve things, but we're never really led to, even think about what it means to commit murder as a moral sin. The bigger crime is fraud to this movie.
Yeah, it is. It's 100%. It's 100%. They do not care. This movie does not care that somebody is dead. This movie cares that somebody is dead and some other people are trying to make money off it. That is the real. That is the real crime of this film. And in some ways, that is like a really interesting look at the insurance industry and like how cutthroat it is in terms of they don't give a crap about. They don't care if any of the people they give policies to die, as long as they die in a way that they don't have to pay out. They're like, go ahead, chop a tree down on yourself, drive a car with faulty brakes, like do anything possible, do whatever you want. We don't care if you die. Just we're not paying for it. That's basically their entire policy throughout the entire film.
because that's where Edward G. Robinson is not a true hero. Like some of these other detectives might be doing it for more just reasons and doing it for the customer and to,
No.
bring some sort of closure to them. But he's really does not care one bit about doing justice for the family. It's just about justice for the insurance company. And also, I think just justice for him, for himself, just for him to prove to himself that he's the smartest and knows the best. That's the real motivation. I think it's just that you could figure it out. It's like solving a puzzle.
I mean, forget justice. It's not even like he's like a bully. Like he bullies people who aren't smart enough to realize that they're getting bullied into signing things. He forces people to sign stuff after threatening them and throwing out allegations. Like he's totally he's totally a scam tactics guy and somebody who just like his entire goal is to fuck over anyone possible with the goal of keeping the company from ever having to spend money. So it is kind of fascinating that he gets set up, and you're right, when he gets set up as the hero, but like kind of, he's very much a part of a machine that is not focused on morality and doing the right thing. It is 100% just focused on like who has to pay money. And in the eyes of Edward G. Robinson, the only thing that matters is that if people get hurt, they pay the money themselves, because it doesn't matter if they go bankrupt. I don't care as long as the company doesn't have to spend a cent, I don't care. It's really his motto.
I think there will be some real interesting comparisons to make between his character and Sidney Greenstreet's character, because it's from Connecticut. Because in the same way, Sidney Greenstreet's character, starts to seem like he comes off as having the moral upper hand of being against the trickery that's being gained, but really it all comes down to what the circulation of his first paper. So it's like the morals are just a cover for the business perspective, which is what this movie is in a lot of ways, I think, about. How morals get corrupted by money and by mixed up priorities, business priorities. And
it goes back to the basic idea of just morals are great until they get in the way. Like it's easy to be moral. It's like basically the idea of morals is it's easy to be moral. It's easy to do the morally right thing if it aligns with your interests. The problem occurs for most people is when doing the morally right thing is against your own self-interest. Like that is the point where you start saying if people are true in terms of their morals, or just they're doing what they actually just doing what they want and cloaking it in the veil of I'm doing what's morally right.
It's a very cynical perspective on human nature, that we only pretend to act morals for the benefits us.
I mean, if we want to dig into it, there's a very decent argument to be made that the reason people do the right thing is not because they want to do the right thing, but because the pressures of society pressure you into making one choice over another. Like, do people donate to charity because they want to help charity, or do they donate to charity because donating to charity is seen as a positive social thing, and if you do it and then talk about it, you reap the rewards, like the social rewards of doing it. Like there's a question, you can dig down to this. Like, do people ever do anything for
actually even the people that think they're so kind and thoughtful to other people are kind of thoughtful, so people look at them that way. So because they're still getting some sort of attention out of it too. There's always a positive reward out of anything, and that's what behavior trains us. I'm blanking on the word. But trains us to complete positive behaviors by receiving positive attention.
There's a term I'm blanking it. Reinforcement. It's reinforcing.
Yes, thank you.
Right, like there's so many questions about maybe the first time you volunteered at the animal shelter, you did it because you wanted to do a good thing, but then you realize that the benefit of doing it is that people are like, oh, you're such a good person for helping this thing. So then at some point your motive for doing it gets twisted from trying to be a good person to I want the rewards of being seen as a good person.
And even if people are verbalizing, just the thought of knowing you did something for someone else makes you feel like you're a good person. Is that personal thought and self-confidence that makes you want to do it, not the actual helping it. You're still boosting something about yourself up. There's still something to gain.
Basically, it's really hard to tell if people are ever trying to do the right thing. And now we've become the depressing corner. But I think in some ways this movie asks those questions of you.
Yes, I don't think we're so far off on what the movie is going for in things, which is the endless, loop of what morality can actually be.
And I think Wilder likes the fact that this movie puts you in a position where you have to root against characters you would traditionally root for and root for characters you would traditionally root against. Because I think like Robinson is just such an example of a character that in any other movie you'd be like, you're a dick. Why are you screwing over all these people? But in this film, it's so set up to being like, look, he's the hero. He's the one stopping the bad people. Although there's nothing like heroic or good about his behavior, and even the way he responds towards people trying to get claims fixed is kind of terrible. And like, it's the ambiguity is just kind of like such an important part of this film. Let's see. Let's talk about Lola and Nino Zacchetti. And Nino Zacchetti is Lola's boyfriend, and then that's kind of the final big twist of the film. Is the final twist and the kind of final turn we have against Stanwyck is the reveal that Zacchetti isn't just this somewhat hot-headed, potentially not great person who is dating the daughter behind the dad's back, but also someone who has actively been brought into the scheme by Stanwyck. And then this is kind of like the final straw for McMurray and kind of the reason that you see the final turn against her. And then it is a weird end to a movie where McMurray turns against her and then kind of allies with Zacchetti. Like this movie does some interesting stuff, especially in terms of like the dynamics between genders. Like the idea of the movie has an interesting, almost like almost a bros before hoes ending to.
I mean, it's definitely the evils of women and how it can bring men down the wrong path. That our sins are all caused by falling for a woman. That both these guys were just caught in the trap, and deep down they might be innocent, honorable men.
Which is pretty funny if you really look at the actions throughout the film. Nothing about them says to you that these are like good people, or like,
I mean,
both
once
of them
you name your character Nino Zacchetti, you know that guy is a jackass. That guy is up to trouble.
Well, even just the first scene you meet him, like he just comes off as such a dick. But to like the end, it is an interesting moment to have like them both turn on Stanwyck at the same time, which in some ways is kind of an interesting. It's somewhat an interesting comment on just like gender roles and how like these two guys would have totally just gone along with her scheme and done all these terrible things. But then realizing that there's in some ways it's a really interesting commentary on like they were willing to go along with it when they thought that they were unique and special to her. But the minute that bubble is popped, they're like, yeah, you're a terrible person. We're gonna off you and get rid of you. Like it's like a really interesting like just take on like how the only way she succeeds with these guys is by convincing them that they are unique and matter to her.
That's all for them, and it's something when you fall for that more glamorous risky part of life that falls for when he had the love of Lola. Lola's probably the most morally clean person within this movie. She's the one that doesn't really get smothered in any kind of ill will, to where but however not living in this path of crime and path of sin that all these other characters are kind of marking themselves up for. It seems like she doesn't even belong in this world, and that's why Nino is like grew past her in a way and more into the Stanwyck. That maybe even this movie's looking at that morally shininess that she has is a mirage. Like to be part of this world, like Neo Zacchetti, once you grow up, you just fall prey to it. You can believe that at one point Nino might have been like her, been this kind of innocent, and this is him matured in a way, getting caught up in this act.
Well, there is some indication that like Nino's story is maybe more tragic than some of the other characters, and that he was like somebody who was in medical school, trying to do good things, trying to gain upward mobility, improve himself in life, and then kind of like hard times hit him, and he just kind of got the system kind of spit him back out, and he ended up in this place. And it is really interesting watching the relationships between Zacchetti and Lola, and being like, oh, this is really just like one of those like he's older than her. She's interested in the older guy, and is I think a little naive for several moments to understand how much of a dick he is. And it's sort of the same relationship she has with McMurray, where she kind of thinks he's a nice person and probably initially and then kind of gets to the point of realizing he's kind of a tool. And she is really kind of the one innocent character in this, and the one kind of morally pure character who is generally just a good person who kind of unfortunately is surrounded by kind of terrible people, and it's not really her fault.
And maybe this is the start of her decline. We didn't see the sequel of Key's sequel, but could be the trauma that that this movie kind of purports that everyone goes through at some point to bring you into this shadowy world that she just hasn't undergone that that trauma, or as I said, that kind of maturity in a way. As the movie kind of views that's becoming an adult, is getting all grayed up. In their moral values. And maybe this is the start of her starting to get blurred lines a little bit. Because she just like watched her dad get murdered, and then her stepmom, caused the crime, and more gun violence. She's really caught up in something. Her boyfriend was part of this. This is real trauma setting. She's not going to be fine and calm after this.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's almost the character you wish you saw more of, because I think in some respects her, we don't necessarily, the story about the mom is told as a way to catch the audience up to steam and make them realize why we shouldn't like Stanwyck. But it also does somewhat ignore the fact that, wow, we really don't dig into the fact how much trauma this girl's experienced, watching multiple parents get offed in front of her by the same person, and then her boyfriend's kind of a terrible person, and then simultaneously he's a terrible person, and she has no one to talk to about this, to the point where she's hanging out with Fred McMurray randomly. That's kind of the biggest plea for help of the entire film, is just if you're just randomly hanging out with this dude, you clearly something is not going well.
In a way, I think she was also representing that call back to grace to McMurray, as Stanwyck is the apple, the snake with the apple, in the Garden of Eden, that Lola is the call back to the heavens, her way back to be honest about what you've gone through. Because she goes, in a way, he's endeared to her in those moments, and that's when he starts to get a little bit frazzled by what he's done.
She is just she's the counterpoint to Stanwyck, and being the idea of Stanwyck's point is, all these people have done terrible things to me, so then I am justified in doing terrible things. And Lola's point is on the contrary, to being all these terrible things have happened around me, but I am choosing not to do terrible things. So it is kind of the comparison between them is very important for the functioning of the film. Zach, do you have any final thoughts on Double Indemnity?
Nah, good movie. It's a good one for the marathon, because a lot of the Stanwyck ones we picked, I think the ones she shines in have a little bit of the same zenith, at least in its genres and its purpose. So it's nice to see her, in this noir side, in this negative side. But I also think this is probably her most watched movie, and the one that's most considered a classic. And I think it has a false idea of what Stanwyck's true strengths are. So I wish people would give some of the comedies a chance after they watch Double Indemnity to see what a magnificent star she really was.
Yeah, I think this is a really important one to include in the marathon, because we really had the first three are very much kind of screwball comedies, and then we go into this one, and then the one following is, so next week we're going to come back and we're going to do Christmas in Connecticut, which is also a little bit of a different take. It's more similar to some of the other ones, but it's also still different. Yeah, I think this movie, it is interesting. You make a really good point. This is the movie that Stanwyck is known for in the general public, and it is interesting because this is not what Stanwyck's career is. This is the outlier and not the norm of her roles. This is sort of if Cary Grant was known for Gunga Din or something. It was just a random performance that does not fall in line with the rest of his career. So yeah, I would say that to everyone who's followed along on the process with us, I hope you join us next week for Christmas in Connecticut, and also just delve more into Stanwyck, because she's clearly just an incredibly talented performer who, I think the biggest knock against Stanwyck is just her films are often not on the same level as her. And I think that's the reason that she's not held at the same esteem as other actresses of the era. She just unfortunately does not have as many of the top tier films. She's great in everything she's in. She just doesn't have as many of the memorable, true classics of a time period.
I agree, disagree. 4 of these are true classics and masterpieces.
I would say 2 of these are classics and that are remembered throughout time, but that's less than a Hepburn or a Bergman or other people from the same era. which is not her fault. Because like here, I mean, we've talked about this in the John Doe episode and the Ball of Fire episode. I don't think those movies are as good as she is. She's better than the movies in a lot of examples, and that's in some ways the thing that has her remembered less than some other people.
I'm a lot higher in Ball of Fire than you, so I disagree with that statement, but I do with the John Doe.
Yeah,
I think Ball of Fire is a great script. But yes,
that's fair. But I think you would agree that Ball of Fire is not remembered as a classic that everyone needs to watch as like film education.
I said it in my heart. In my heart, it's a classic as much as any of the Katharine Hepburn movies. I just love it that much. But yes, it's not as remembered. Christmas in Connecticut does get Christmas benefits a little bit, but that one that people, I don't know. Maybe
it is weird because
it's 100th anniversary.
We won't delve too deep in that, but you're right. That is a weird movie that has the potential to be a lot bigger, considering who's in it and like the Christmas season, but feels somewhat underseen as like a Christmas movie. Like I feel like a lot of people don't watch that every year. But we will talk about that next week. Thank you everybody for watching and enjoying Barbara Stanwyck month. We're almost done. One more episode next week, and on that episode we will announce the new topic. Thank you, Zach. I hope that everyone enjoyed it. We will see you next week. Zach, do you have a song for us?
No, I want you to sing us out. You're out here bragging. Now you guys.
I don't have a song. I don't have any lyrics.
Sing Sinatra. Sing Sinatra. Make up a song. I'm gonna tell you the words. Ready? And you're gonna sing it after I say it.
No,
so we're gonna start with
love you.
Double Indemnity.
Double indemnity.
Not single indemnity.
Not single indemnity.
But double, I said.
But double indemnity, I said.
By the Lucas and Zack podcast.
Lucas and Zack podcast. Good night, folks. See you next week. Bye-bye.